kickoff. And it got quiet all of a sudden. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for being with us. My name is Malcolm Moran, and on behalf of the Sports Capital Journalism Program at IUPUI, within the Department of Journalism and Public Relations and the School of Liberal Arts, welcome to this very special occasion with two guests that were NFL insiders long before they became ESPN NFL insiders. They offer decades of observations and insight on the subject of the growth of the National Football League and the exponential expansion of real-time, 24/7, too much ain't enough coverage of the industry. They are here broadcasting live on NFL Insiders and other ESPN platforms from the NFL Scouting Combine at Lucas Oil Stadium. And we're grateful that they found time to be part of an academic setting to discuss issues they have observed from both sides of the fence. We welcome Dr. Lynn Lashbrook, if you could wave in the back. Thank you for being here. We welcome the attendees of the Sports Management Worldwide NFL Combine Career Conference. I've been told to pass along that the room tomorrow will be bigger and the weather will be warmer eventually. We can deliver the room first, though. We thank you for your hospitality and we wish you a successful conference. Our speakers tonight: Mark Dominik spent 19 seasons with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, including 5 as general manager. And during the 2002 season, when Mark served as director of pro personnel, the Buccaneers were Super Bowl champions. Please welcome Mark Dominik. And from Mount St. Michael Academy in the Bronx to Canton, Ohio, and the Pro Football Hall of Fame via Indianapolis, Indiana, the first 6-time winner of the National Football League Executive of the Year Award, the president and vice chairman of the Super Bowl champion Indianapolis Colts. Please welcome home Bill Polian. Gentlemen, thank you for being here, and it's all you.
Great. Well, I appreciate it. I think it's a great opportunity. I was still calling Mr. Polian. I can't help myself. We'll go with Bill for tonight if you don't mind, but it's always an honor to share the stage and have a chance to talk to you all about what we do now in terms of media and how it's really changed over the last couple of years, really, over the last 5 to 10 years. Social media, television, and just the growth of our game has been dramatically seen throughout all the television sets and different venues. We both do Sirius XM radio, so we talk on that a lot, and it's a great forum to just kind of really talk about the game that we love and have had passion for our entire life. I appreciate you all coming. I know you have choices to do anything you want in the evenings, and tonight you decided to come here and have a chance to see you and listen to Bill Polian talk a lot about the National Football League. I think what we'll do is I'm gonna hit him with some questions, and then I may follow up on some of his answers if I feel like there's something that I'd like to add to the forum. And I think as we go into this for a little bit, maybe 15, 20 minutes into it, we'll open it up and let you all ask questions. Try to stay within the realm of not asking who the #1 quarterback is in the draft. Trying not to say, what was the toughest.
We're not going to scoop ourselves.
No, we can't do that. You got to tune in, right?
You're right.
We used to ask whenever was the draft, right? You get to the draft and there's like our local beat reporters are like, who are you taking? I said, we want the ratings to go up. You're going to have to watch the draft and see how it plays out for yourself. So they would never tell them. They'd always get any good answer. But this is a good night, and it should be a fun night. And we'll walk around a little bit. We'll talk around a little bit. But I think to start off, I wanted to hit him on a question that I think a lot of people in the Indianapolis area have been talking about, a question that people in Denver talked about, and a question and a player that he talked about on Insiders, which was great insight today. It's something I didn't realize. And he shared one of his best war room stories, or excuse me, interview stories at the Combine here. You have 15 minutes to interview players. I call it speed dating in the National Football League. You're trying to figure out what these guys are all about. Well, when Peyton Manning happened to step in, he had a different opinion. So I'd like you to, if you don't mind, share that story with Peyton Manning when you first met him there.
Yeah, you have 15 minutes to interview a player. That's not nearly enough time. And as time went on, we developed a whole new way of doing it. But this was in the dark ages when we hadn't really perfected everything. And the night before, Ryan Leaf, who was the other quarterback being considered for the #1 pick, we had the #1 pick in the draft, blew us off. He didn't show up.
It's amazing.
His agent said that I had given him the wrong time, which was not true. The agent, whose name shall remain nameless, wrote in a book this past summer that he in fact told Ryan not to come because he didn't want him going with the Colts. That was a bad choice, obviously. But anyway, in the context of it, now we're interviewing Peyton. So it's the head coach and myself, director of player personnel, offensive coordinator, quarterback coach. Offensive coordinator was Tom Moore, quarterback coach is Bruce Arians, now the coach of the Cardinals. And so Peyton walks in, and he's got his typical, what I became to know 14 years later, he's got his yellow pad and his pencil and his briefcase. He sits down, we say, hello, how are you? This is so-and-so. Nice to see you. The pleasantries, would you like a glass of good water, soda, whatever? And so he says, would you mind if I just asked you guys a few questions? And we said, no, not at all, go right ahead. And so he began to ask questions and take notes, and we were answering. All of a sudden, the horn blows. Beep. End of interview. I look at my watch. 15 minutes has gone by. So he stands up. He said, thanks, guys. I really appreciate it. Nice to see you. I hope we see each other again. I would really like to be with the Colts. I guess I got to move on. See you. We looked at each other and said, he interviewed us. We never asked any questions. Little did we know that that's what we were going to deal with for the next 14 years so successfully. But it proves that you learned something from the interview.
That's an amazing story. It's really, it kind of dives into why he was such a great pro, because he was so detail-oriented. He certainly had a lot of intensity there in the public eye right now. A lot of people are talking about that. And from the social aspect, obviously it's very well shown throughout the national media right now that people are wanting to talk a lot about that. Yeah. Did that come up within your investigation when you guys thought about drafting Big Man? How much of that actually played into it, or did any of it?
No, none of it came up. I was asked this question on the radio, and it got some traction in the Twitter world. I should say right away, I'm not on Twitter. I don't read it. You know, I'm not one of those social media persons. Every once in a while, my wife will say to me, did you see this? And my answer is, why are you reading that stuff? That said, I was asked, did it come up? It never did. I remember vaguely when I was reminded of it, some sort of kerfuffle that showed up in the newspaper when, that some incident took place. But as you go and do investigations, the things that you can get access to are police reports, that's in the public domain, university reports if they're willing to give it to you, and whatever else, including interviews with the head coach, the position coach, the head trainer, people like that. And it's very thorough. It's very thorough. Our security director here had lots of, he's a former high-ranking IPD officer, had lots of interaction with the FBI, and he said this is no different, this process is no different than what the FBI does in a background check or what IPD did if they were going through a thorough background check. So it is that. Nothing ever appeared. And then we spent 14 years here, and the upshot of that is Lucas Oil Stadium, this ring that I'm privileged to wear, the Lombardi Trophy up at the Surf, up at the office, and perhaps most importantly, Peyton Manning Children's Hospital up at St. Vincent's. So I judge a person by the body of their work, and what I know is that he's as fine a person as I've ever been around. The other fact that has come to light is that there is a Title IX suit being brought against the University of Tennessee, apparently involving some very serious allegations against football players in the present time, within the last 2 years, I believe. And as part of that suit, Peyton's name was mentioned in the suit. The university has asked a judge to remove his name. They use the phrase, it's utterly not relevant. And so we'll see what the judge has to say. That's the next issue. Beyond that, I told you what I know.
Yeah, that's good. And I have one other random question I'm going to ask. You got inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame, which is amazing if you really sit back and think about how few people from office have ever been in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Yet you choose, you have two of the most important rings I think anybody could ever have in NFL history. You got a Pro Football Hall of Fame ring, you choose your Colts Super Bowl ring. And you choose to win the Colts Super Bowl ring. I noticed that today when I was sitting down talking to you. And you don't wear the Hall of Fame ring, which is probably one of the biggest. Why do you ever wear the Hall of Fame ring, or is this something where you always wear your Super Bowl ring, or is it just wherever you are currently?
Well, I do wear the Hall of Fame ring if I'm at a function where I would be representing the Hall of Fame or something of that nature. It's a knuckle buster to begin with.
What a shame.
I almost get embarrassed, it's so big. But I read something, this was in the back of my mind for a long time, I could never verbalize it. I read it in a book written by David Eisenhower, the grandson of Dwight Eisenhower, famous United States president, and most famously the general that led our efforts in World War II against Germany. And he was, when he retired, President Eisenhower was asked, how would you like to be addressed in retirement? And most people would say, Mr. President, obviously. And he said, no, I would like to be addressed as general because I earned that. I was elected to the presidency. Now, it isn't quite the same. I'm as grateful as can be. I still can't put my head around the fact that I'm in the Hall of Fame. But, this was earned by guys here. And so it means an awful lot to me. It means an awful lot.
Well, we're going to kind of take this into more of a media mindset. It's now a 12-month cycle, and as I think a lot of people are realizing now, because of what we can do, what we can put on television, the content, the combine's obviously growing in. I don't think a lot of people realize that the NFL was a 12-month job. I think a lot of people thought, they used to ask me all the time, now that the season's over, you must get a little more downtime. I said, no, it's worse. It's a lot more busy, isn't it? It's never worse. It's just a lot more busy. In national media and how we cover it and how you talk about it on ESPN and other platforms, what do you think it is that it allows us to be a 12-month cycle? And what are some of the avenues you've noticed over the last few years that have become bigger because of the exposure that media has?
I think it's important to put it all in historical perspective. Commissioner Tagliabue said this years ago. By the way, one of the finest and brightest men I've ever met in my life. He was talking about why the NFL is so popular. And he said there are lots of accidents of fate that come into play here. Yeah, the coaching is great. Yes, the athletes are beyond belief. And the competition is terrific. But don't forget, the television screen is roughly a rectangle. Our field is a rectangle. And it fits nicely, in fact, better than any other sport on that television screen. Everything's easy to see. And about 3/4 of the nation is indoors watching television when our sport reaches its pinnacle. So all of those external factors, if you will, play into the fact that the NFL has become America's most popular sport. There's no doubt about that. That happened, actually, that line was crossed somewhere around 1965. The Harris poll used to poll people every year. I guess they still do. And up until that time, baseball and horse racing, believe it or not, were the most popular sports in America. And football passed both of them sometime in the mid-60s and now has gone on to be by far the most popular sport. And I'm picking these figures out of the air. They're random, but they're not completely accurate. But the typical NFL regular season Monday night game will go about an 18. Well, The networks are hard pressed to find an entertainment show that gets that. It would be the #1 entertainment show that gets an 18. Monday Night Football is as popular as the top entertainment show. Ergo, the rights fees. The people on Park Avenue who do that negotiating are much more accurate about what those ratings are than we are. So they know how popular it is. And as it's become cliche to say, we are, all sports are, but the NFL most particularly, is a real reality show. It's unscripted. So you don't know what's going to happen from week to week. All except really Mark and I take pride in saying we were the outliers at ESPN. And everywhere else in the media were saying, oh, it's Carolina, oh, it's Carolina, oh, it's Carolina. And we were you did it for good reason, I did it because my heart was with 18. But, you know, everybody was predicting a Carolina win, and it didn't turn out that way, which is why people are still, you know, as Boomer, our colleague Boomer is fond of saying, that's why they play the games. Everybody tunes in to see how it will turn out, and it's as unpredictable as can be.
The draft moved to Chicago last year. And I don't think a lot of people know that. You know, we all send representatives, like myself, Bill Polian, we would go back into our draft room and we would actually call. There's actually a person on the phone talk about, it's still a little antiquated. There's a person on the phone you dial into and actually put them to put the name down. But the draft circuit changed tremendously from the way, the amount of days it is, from, you know, now putting it at prime time. What have you thought about the change in the way that the NFL handles the draft? And how about for you? I know I haven't personally, but how did you feel with breaking up the draft over the 3 days it is now?
Well, when it went to 3 days, I thought it was really tough on the clubs. That's hard. Running a draft, as we both have done, is a little like playing 5 hands of poker at the same time. And you're doing it for roughly 8 hours a day. That's pretty hard to do. It's hard to concentrate. One of the idiosyncrasies I had was that I wanted the draft room quiet. Now, we had, Mr. Irsay had sponsors and friends and family in there, but I always asked them, please be quiet. And they invariably, they turned the television on because they wanted to hear what Mel had to say or Todd had to say. And I'd walk back into the draft room maybe an hour before I pick and say, please turn that television down. I didn't want to hear those voices. They're good guys, but I didn't need their help on draft day. and so, I'm sure Mark did it in his own way.
I did the same thing. I was in very business in my draft. It was extremely quiet. I only had 6 or 7 people in there, and the head coach was come in, and then I would only invite position coach when we were getting close to maybe taking his player. I was very serious about it's not a ruckus, it's not a time. It was a time for you have to be a quick thinker. You have to really decide if this is the time to move, this is the time to trade. You know, and, we were very aggressive in terms of calling clubs and trying to see if we could get anything working, even if we don't want to make the trade happen.
Yeah, that's right. And so now, fast forward to Radio City Music Hall, my first draft out of the draft room in 30 years. And I walk into Radio City Music Hall, and there are people seated behind me and to my left and right, drinking beer and eating hot dogs and wearing jerseys and cheering. And there's a guy on the stage who's like a carnival barker introducing people. And every once in a while, you know, a pick is announced, and I couldn't hear it because of all the yelling. It was as though I stepped onto the moon. You know, I've been on Earth for 30 years in this draft room, which was pristine and had the board up and serious, and all of a sudden I'm at this spectacle. So that was shocking, to say the least. I'm not sure I uttered any coherent words on ESPN's air that particular day. The move to Chicago was interesting. Stretching it out to 3 days is really hard on the clubs, I believe. But I think the marketing people feel that it's good. The move to Chicago was interesting in that the building was much, much tighter than Radio City Music Hall and provided some logistical issues, both for, I think, for the clubs and for the media. But we got through it okay. And ultimately, when you're back in the draft room, your focus is where it should be, which is on putting together the best draft that you can. The reason for the draft, from a club perspective, is to get the best possible football players that you can onto your team in all 7 rounds with the supplemental picks and in collegiate free agency. For the clubs, the draft doesn't end when it goes off the air. You've still got a day's worth of work trying to sign collegiate free agents, many of whom will go on to be Pro Bowlers. So it's a completely, it couldn't be more different. What you see on television could not be more different than what's happening in the draft.
To that point, we had in Tampa Bay, when Rich McKay was the general manager, had allowed a draft room camera in, which has become a lot more opening up the curtain. And that's what a lot of people want in terms of the media exposure that we do. Did you ever? I don't remember.
Never.
I didn't think so. I don't
They wouldn't even ask.
Polian eating any Oreos or
Hot dogs.
hot dogs like crazy. But yeah, and you're seeing that. You're going to continue to see that. The league really is pushing that,
Yeah,
as you know, to open up the doors behind that draft room and see what's going on there. You've seen the John Schneider hugging the Pete Carrolls that they're picked. You know, the best thing is that there's never been a pick that's ever been made where nobody doesn't shake each other's hands and be very excited.
No, that's right. Everybody said, Marv Levy, who was my mentor and is in the Hall of Fame, used to say, everybody's undefeated on draft day. It's the best day of the year. You know, we got all the players we want.
It's perfect. It is a great day. It's really one of the best things to me about being a general manager. That opening day, game day, the draft is a special.
How many of you saw the movie Draft Day? Quite a few. All right, you're all aficionados. Well, I'll give you, with all due respect to Kevin Costner, I'll give you my wife talked me into going, by the way. I went under duress. But, the only thing that was realistic about that movie was that during the draft, you eat a lot of bad food. Everything else was,
I'm pretty close to that. You know, the one thing when I saw that, and it took me months to see it because I didn't know if I wanted to see it. Because it was, I hadn't. You missed the game, and it's a hard thing to want to go see them try to react. The one thing I felt that I noticed that was real for me was how many times Kevin Costner would go and get to his own spot, just quiet and think. And that was the one thing that I used to do. Sometimes I would walk out the draft room, sounds like you did too,
Yeah, I did.
and just go to a spot where you just go back to your board in your own office and just think about what's the best thing for the organization. I thought that was the realest moment of that story. Besides, it is a lot of bad food. If you're a hot dog guy,
Yeah.
I killed a lot of pizzas here. Enjoyed that. You know, the media has certainly changed. We're part of the media now. But with the way the media changed with the Colts over the time that you were the general manager, how much did you change in terms of how you handled the media, knowing that it was getting bigger and more powerful and social media was starting to come out? How much did you actually change your policies towards how you handled the media, or did you?
We did, grudgingly, but we did. I started in this business in the National Football League in 1977, and I was actually at the draft. That was the last time I was actually at a draft in New York, and it was a room about twice the size of this with 30, well, in those days, 28 tables, a small gallery of people that maybe sat half the people that are in this room, and then a gallery of reporters. And reporters would actually walk around on the floor between the tables and take a look at your car, or stop and kibitz and things like that, stuff that's unheard of today. So that's how much that part of it's grown. From a media standpoint, I had read every book written by a presidential press secretary up until about 2004. And then Ari Fleischer's book came out, and I read that one. And there were lots of things in there that were good. There were some things that were obviously not applicable. After all, the presidency and running an NFL club are, apples and small peanuts. But there were some things that were good. But then all of a sudden, social media came along and exploded, and all the rules changed. All the paradigms changed. So we began to spend a lot of time trying to discuss it and deal with it and see how we could function in that atmosphere. Fortunately, the bulk of it came to be after I left, so we never really were in the crosshairs of the explosion that now takes place. But I think for those of you that want to understand this phenomenon, how many have heard of a case called Sullivan versus the New York Times? Okay, very few historians here. Okay, I'll give you a brief synopsis. It was a case brought by a gentleman named Sullivan, who, as I understand it, was a local government official. And the New York Times, he claimed, had defamed him. And the case went all the way to the Supreme Court. And it was decided in favor of the New York Times. Essentially what the Supreme Court said was, if you are a public figure, and they broadly defined public figure, then in order to prove defamatory judgment against an entity, media entity, you have to prove that they knowingly printed or said false things about you, and they did it with malice, with the intent to harm you, which makes it exceedingly difficult for public figures to bring suits. You simply can't win. That's never been revisited. And I heard the other day on we'll give our other employer a plug here, Sirius Radio. They have a station called POTUS, which if you're a political junkie, which I am, is a great station to listen to. And there's lots of interesting and informed talk there. And someone said that, quoted Arthur Sulzberger, the then publisher of the New York Times, when Sullivan came down. He said, this is a great decision for the New York Times, but I don't know if it will be beneficial with some other media entities that don't have our standards. Now that was, Malcolm, help me, was that the 60s?
Later than that, I believe.
70s, okay, somewhere in the 70s. And he was prescient at that period of time. Because now, with social media, anything can be said about anybody, and it doesn't have to be true. It can be done with malice, it can be done with ignorance, and it's out there, and people respond to it. So you, as a club operator, have to be able to teach your players and your staff people, this is what's important, this is what's unimportant. Make sure you do not respond to that which is unimportant. Don't take it to heart. It represents only a very, very minute and probably less than a astute minority. And you got to fight that all the time. And today, as you all know, guys walk into a meeting room and they got the phones and the iPads. I had a discussion a couple of weeks ago with a general manager who said, should we ban the phones or ban the iPads? And my answer was, if I were you, I'd have a rack outside of the meeting room, put the phones in the rack before the meeting.
Just like high school.
Yeah, meet for 20 minutes, half hour, let them go out, check and see if it's an emergency, you can answer. If not, come back in the meeting room. I think they extended the meeting period to an hour before they could check the phone. But naturally, it's a problem. And at the professional level, I suspect it's even more of a problem than the college level, because at the professional level, you have a wife or a significant other, she has a family, you have your own family, you have your own circle of friends, and invariably, if something negative is said, the phone will blow up, and you'll have 57 messages saying, did you see what so-and-so said about you? And so your whole focus is away from trying to do your job and on to what may be an innocuous statement. It's just the world we live in today. But clubs and club operators, coaches, general managers have to really pay close attention to how you manage that.
I know this, we follow every tweet of every one of our players. And every morning we would get a printout of every tweet that they send out the night before, just to kind of give us a heads up if there's anything coming down the pipe we need to be aware of. Because it was that serious. And I do tweet. I'm a seldom tweeter. I only tweet football things. You will never know that I had a good meal at some restaurant. I'm going to the grocery store today or anything. I'm not in that world. But I do realize that Twitter has become the bathroom wall of it's a tough medium to be a part of, but I think it's something that all clubs realize you have to use it because it is so powerful. Instagram has certainly grown dramatically. I think you're going to see a lot bigger use of Instagram by clubs, and I think you're seeing just an explosion of social media that all the clubs are dealing with. And I think to Bill's point, one of the things you're trying to figure out in those 15-minute interviews is, can this guy handle that kind of heat? Because now it is so easy, it is so distracting for players. And we were going to that in Tampa Bay, where we would realize that players are just as distracted. And I said high school because we treated our kids sometimes like high school, meaning we would do the 20-minute meeting, get up, go check your phone. 20-minute meeting, because look at us, right? I mean, how hard is it for any of you here that have a phone that haven't checked it yet in the 30 minutes we've been up on stage, right? And some of you I've seen have already checked because you just can't help it. And players are the same way. And so we're really aware of social media and aware of just use of it. Because I can remember this. I will say, I can't remember the exact year, but I remember back in probably '99, when cell phones were starting to really become viable. I remember turning to John Intic at the time, who ended up being, he was right across the desk from me, almost this close, who ended up being the New York Jets general manager. I remember turning to him, because Rich McKay walked in and said, check this out, I got a new cell phone. I looked at John and said, I'm never getting one of those things. I don't know what year you got your first cell phone, but mine was
late, it was in the 2000s.
Social media. I think we've already chewed up a little bit of time. I would be happy. Lynn Lashbrook has a microphone, and I will find her. If anyone does have a question and you want to raise your hand, she will come to you. We'll continue the discussion, but if you do have a question you'd like to talk to us about, just your thoughts on social media, the football, national football, certainly we're open to hearing those questions, and I'll always have Mr. Bullock, Bill will always answer first, and then if I feel like there's something I can add, I will certainly do so.
Before we go to the questions, let me just add this, because I think it's germane to what you will do in your professional careers. If I were running a club today and I've given owners and general managers this advice, I would set up a press office exactly like that politicians use. A Bigfoot press secretary who dealt with the media, a number of people in there who followed Twitter, who followed Instagram, who are on top of everything day in and day out. A series of clips that came to my desk and the head coach's desk every day telling us, pay attention to this, don't pay attention to that. Usually just give me the stuff that I need to know. Make sure that every media contact comes through that office. In my day, and I'm sure in yours, John Clayton would call me at home. Chris Mortensen would call me at home. Adam Schefter would call me, on my direct line in the office. You can't do that anymore. You just can't. So you have to have a formalized press office and press operation, and that's not handing out lineups at the game. It's meaningful work that monitors what's going on and makes sure that your message gets out, and that's a whole another part of it with your club, internet, and video communications operations, because you can bypass the media now. You can go right past it. And you can put your message out on the internet, on television, on any of the other platforms that are available, and you should. You absolutely should. So that is a part of the business that has grown exponentially in relation to the exponential growth of social media.
And I would piggyback on that real quickly. I agree, because I felt like in Tampa we had a PR director, but I think you have to have a social media director, and then I also felt like you had to have a promotions director, somebody who's every day their thought is, what are we selling? Or what are we trying to tell our fans through our media industry, what your point is? And I think that the league is not caught up to social media yet in terms of the club level. I think your point is right, that we're trying to get that message out, just having a chance to reflect and see how and the thirst for the information. I think that there's a lot of avenues still available in the Nashville Lake that are going to explode, specifically in the public relations department of the world.
One of the best I've ever worked with in the 40 years I've been in the business is sitting right back there, Allie Stoneberg from ESPN. She husbands us around and makes sure that everything's, that we know what's coming up at all times, who we're going to speak to. If you want to speak to us, you need to speak to her first. And she's great at it. She's a wonderful person. She's the antithesis of me, anyway. That would be the kind of person, exactly the kind of person that I would hire as my personal representative. And, you know, you're going to talk, you want to talk to me, she'll determine who does it and when we do it.
Hello, my name is Nicholas Curry. I go to IUPUI down the street. I'm senior year, going for sports management. My question, not necessarily a social media question, is more on your interview with Peyton Manning. I wanted to know what kind of questions he had asked you in that interview, if you don't mind.
Let me see if I can remember. That's a long time ago. 20 years ago. Nice to have a Jaguar here, by the way. The first thing he asked was, what was our offensive system going to be? And we explained it in some detail. He wanted to know what our practice regimen was going to be. I just remembered a very interesting thing. We explained what the practice regimen was going to be. He said, by the way, if you draft me, I will be in the next day, the day after the draft. And I said, Peyton, you can't do that. It's against the rules. He said, Bill, I'm going to be there the day after the draft. You figure out how we obey the rules. So it was those kinds of, they were all hardcore football questions. And we did come away with the idea that the impression we got, which was correct, that this is a guy that was immersed and passionate about the details of football.
Versus Ryan Lee from Mr. B.
Versus Ryan didn't show up, yeah.
Good evening to both of you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Brandon Davis. I'm from Aberdeen, Maryland. I completed the football GM and scouting course back in December at the end of this past year. My question is for both of you, did any other player give you a similar type of impression that Peyton Manning did during your interview with him?
No, but I'll share a story with you that is just the opposite. In the early days of the collective bargaining agreement, there was no cap on rookie salaries. There was, but it was evaded immediately. And so rookies they were the highest paid players at their position every year in the league. And they would frequently hold out during training camp, which was really a pain in the neck to coaches and players and general managers. And so this one particular player came in, and his father was a high-ranking member of the Marine Corps. And our head coach happened to be a former Marine Corps officer. And so he asked the gentleman at the end of the meeting, now look, he said, Marine to Marine, which carries a lot of weight with people who are Marines. Give it a straight scoop now. Are you going to be in on time? And he said, yes, sir, absolutely. I will be in on time. And he left the room. He was the last player signed that year. He held out the last day of training camp. So that taught me, and I'm sure he was sincere, by the way. I'm not denigrating the young man in any way. That taught me that the agents were in charge of that process, and to a large degree are in charge of the interview process, and that became the genesis of why we changed our process so drastically.
Hello, my name is Sharice May. I'm from Bowie, Maryland. I actually finished the football GM scouting course this summer. Sorry about that. My question for you is, if you had to create a course or a workshop for future GMs on how to deal with the media, what's the top 3 competencies that you would want them to walk away with after they finish the course?
That's a very interesting question. First, demeanor. It's really important to learn how to handle yourself in what essentially can be an adversarial situation. I was very bad at that, very bad.
The different Bill Polian.
The second thing I would advise is that you should always be not only prepared, but emotionally prepared when you go into it. And recognize that the media has a job to do. And just like everyone else in life, there are good people and there are not so good people. And if you're able to recognize that and be prepared, then you'll do a much better job. And then the third thing I would want people to learn is how to present your point of view in a positive way, and sometimes not even answer the question, but present your point of view in a positive way and in a gentlemanly way, or gentlelady way, as the case may be, so that you don't create any more of an adversarial relationship than there already is. And it's interesting, you all don't have time to watch a lot of political television. I sort of do on my off days. And if you watch President Obama long enough, you'll know when he's irritated. You can tell. and so, you know, don't let them see you sweat, which is the number one rule. Because, you know, if someone feels like they can get under your skin, they'll keep doing it. So those three things, I think, would be, and based on my experience, would be the most important.
And I would just jump in just a little bit, and I would just sit there and say that you gotta do your best to not take it personal. Try not to ever bring it home. That would be the one thing I would sit there and say. You try not to bring your business to your house. Because your kids or your wife are all looking at that whole thing, and it affects everybody. So I would really encourage you to be careful that can really seep into the house and really make it a lot harder to go to work every day.
Yeah.
In a very frustrated family environment and extended family, to your point, the text and tweet when you say, did you see this or that?
The one thing that people outside the business don't realize, especially people in the media, because they're trained not to do this. If you read Chris Matthews' first book, he talks a lot about his original training as a media person. They're trained not to take it personally and not to become involved personally with their subjects, because when you're involved personally, you have feelings, and good reporters don't have feelings, they report. Well, the opposite is true. Families, we can take criticism and, you know, keep on going. We've been trained to do that. That's what we've done all our lives. Why?
Charlie Cassidy said once, when it's raining outside, what's in the drum? When it's already wet outside, what's in the drum of rain?
Exactly right, exactly right. But wives and children do not, and the children suffer badly. They really suffer badly. You'd be surprised how cruel children can be. And so you have to, to your point, what you do reflects on them, not just on you. And when I came to grips with that, my wife had a talk with me about that, and when I came to grips with that, it changed my approach pretty dramatically. And it's interesting, because now you're going into a meeting saying, well, it's not just me that's involved here, it's everybody back home, and I don't want to make this any worse than it is.
Hello, first I want to thank you for being here today. I'm an IUPUI student, sports journalism student. It's kind of a two-part question that I have. Sorry, my name is Shekinah Ryan, by the way. First question is, what advice would you give like students that are in journalism and sports management students? What advice would you give them if they're looking to follow in your footsteps? Like, this is a two for the both of you. And the second question is, what event do you think really influenced your career in your life to get you to the point where you are now?
Second question first. I was out of football. I had been a small college coach and didn't succeed. Got into a situation where our staff got fired, and I was out of football, couldn't find a job. And my college coach, who was my mentor for my entire life, called me up. He had become the pro personnel director in Montreal in the CFL. and said, you need to be in football. And I said, yeah, but I don't have a job and I got 4 children. And he said, okay, I'll put you to work as a part-time scout, and that'll be the springboard. You're going to do well. And he did, and the coach of the Montreal Alouettes at the time was Marv Levy. So now you know the rest of the story. And it was a godsend. It was a stroke of luck that wouldn't have happened without him. So that's my story. Relative to how you get in and how you advance, everybody that's asked, I say the same thing. Just do anything you can to get in. And after that, if you have the talent, you'll be recognized. This is the NFL. I can't speak for Major League Baseball or the NBA, but the NFL is the ultimate meritocracy. They don't care where you came from, what race, religion, or creed you are, who your parents are, how much money they have. If you can play, if you can scout, if you can be a good public relations person, you'll advance. People will notice. And both of us came up through the football side, which is scouting, which is a very hard, demanding, tough job because you're on the road 300 days a year. You're away from home 300 days a year. And many times it's weekends as well as weekdays. It's not a 9-to-5 job, and it's not a Monday to Friday job. So you gotta love it. And believe it or not, people weed themselves out. You come in with a class of 10 guys that you started with. 5 years later, it'll be down to 3 or 4.
You'd think that everybody would want to do it, but then when you actually put the time in, it's a grind, and you gotta love it. And I would say, to your point or your question, the one thing I did when I was at the University of Kansas, and this was early in sports management, but I think I was the first or second person in that university to ever get the degree of sports management. It was so upside down. I took human anatomy dissection. I'm dissecting a cadaver here on the sports management page. I'm like, we don't know what we're doing. So what I did do is I volunteered all through the athletic department. And I put posters in Applebee's for team women's volleyball. It didn't matter. I went to swim meets and put up banners. I worked with Coach Mason and the football department and sent out recruit letters and licked stamps. I mean, I just worked anywhere I could within the athletic department. And then the Kansas City Chiefs called Terry Radway as well as Carl Peterson called and said, we're going to start a new scouting program here. We're going to do an internship program we've never done before. Who in Kansas would you recommend? And they recommended me, and that was my big break. But it was because I worked for free and worked with everybody in that athletic department and didn't know what it was going to end up. I actually was interviewed with the Royals for an internship with the Kansas City Royals. And thankfully, Terry Radway said, do you want to come? And I said, yes. And that was the same year baseball went on strike, so I lost an internship. I don't know what would happen. So that's an aha moment for me, sir.
My granddaughter is going to be in college as an undergraduate this fall, and she's a very talented writer. That's Grandpa speaking, but and she said, I really would like to get involved in sports in some way. And I said, great, go volunteer in the basketball office or the football office, and go to work. You will get paid, but you'll get experience and contacts that are invaluable.
And some of you that are older here that are attending, there's different venues right down the street, and you can still get yourself involved within the athletic program thing in your school. They may not have a football program. That's not the point. The point is to put the time in and be known as a worker.
I've told everyone that I've ever talked to in this setting, remember, including my own sons, remember this. Someone is always watching. No matter where you are, what you're doing, if you're involved in our business in some way, someone is watching. And you may never know who that person is.
I said I saw people checking their cell phone at Bill Polian's talking, thinking, I don't know if I'd be checking my cell phone at Bill Polian's talking.
It's happening.
Personally, I know
It's happening.
But it's just one of those things, somebody's always watching you.
Yeah, somebody's always watching. You don't know who it is or how they're going to affect you. But believe it. 10 years or 15 years later, someone will make a call or put in a good word for you. So be on your toes all the time, give it your best all the time. One thing that's great about sports is, as we said before, if you're not willing to give your best 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, it's not for you.
Well, to that point, Bill, Mark, thanks for taking some time out, spend some time with us, give us some nuggets. My name's Anthony Perez, and I'm really plugging in here this weekend because my work is really in social emotional learning and working with teams and sports teams. One thing that you mentioned, a couple things, was someone's always watching. We've heard the idea of what are you doing when no one's looking, and you don't want to let people don't let them see you sweat. In the 60s and 70s, that was easier than now. We talked about social media. We talked about a 15-minute interview where you have to identify intangibles and characters to make sure that this is the right person. In this day and age in social media, a lot of times we're being caught when we don't have the right emotional attributes and how to handle ourselves. We see it on the field, we see it off the field. For feedback from me, what are your thoughts as far as new players and things out there being exposed, good and bad? How important is emotional intelligence to a player and to an organization? At a GM level, you talked about demeanor, discernment, knowing how to relate and connect with people, and that's from the top down. Where do you think emotional intelligence, social emotional intelligence applies? How important would it be to an organization and to players to allow them to be prepared when they take the pads off?
Well, I think it isn't only when they take the pads off, it's throughout your entire existence in the organization. Take a step back. Players in college, by and large, are in a bubble. Generally speaking, even in the SEC, they're not terribly criticized. It's never personal. It's more than it used to be. The general rule used to be these are college students, leave them alone, don't criticize them. There's more criticism now, but it is nothing like they get in the National Football League. Because in the National Football League, people are invested in whatever they do from a gambling standpoint and whatever they do in fantasy football. And there's nothing quite so volatile as a upset fantasy football fan. So the bottom line is that I told the players, and I got this from my friend Brian Burke, who's the president of the Calgary Flames with the NHL. The minute you sign the contract, you have given up your privacy. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 12 months a year. Understand that. Now, we're going to help you through discussion groups, through training, through bringing people, speakers in and things like that. We're going to help you adjust to that world. But understand that the minute you put that logo on of a professional team, you have given up your privacy. You are public property, period. And you got to act accordingly. You have to act accordingly. And you don't have the luxury of being able to even breathe. I mean, look at Cam Newton. The guy who lost the Super Bowl. I'm an expert at that. I lost 5. There's no worse loss other than a death or serious illness in your family. There's no worse professional experience than losing the Super Bowl. And obviously, he was in a terrible mood. He should have been. He didn't have a great day, and he wasn't in the right frame of mind when he went in there, and it played out probably to his detriment in the long run. It's not a criminal offense. It's not a cardinal sin. He just didn't do a good job with the media, but people remember that. So, you're absolutely right. And if I were to go back in it again, that's the other thing that I would emphasize, is social media training and awareness with the players, and I do it on a weekly basis.
Hi, my name is Taylor Scott. I'm an agent advisor with SMWW. And my question to you is, close to something I may try and ask maybe Greg Hilton tomorrow, who does the seat sales and everything, but in your eyes, do you see a concern with the amount of seat licenses that are going up? When you look at the access that goes to streaming and being able to now view the draft, and now we can watch the combine, and we can be in the war room just like you guys are, do you worry about the amount of ticket sales that you're losing in your stadiums? When you look at, I was with the Cowboys and we lost almost 30% when the season started losing, and last year 70% with San Francisco. You're starting to lose those people who really want to go to the games and be a part of that fun. How much do you worry about that versus the access you're giving to all the fans when you open it up with the streaming and the rights, especially as owners?
Well, the answer is I do a lot, even though I don't have to. It's not affecting me anymore, but I worry about it for the sake of the game. I look at it from a little bit different perspective than you. I don't think that all of the access is necessarily a bad thing. And I don't think that that's necessarily what affects attendance. I do think that at the prices we charge, including PSLs, that the fans demand a winner, and it's not possible to field a winner every year, number one. Number two, you can have difficulties relative to injuries or things like that. The last season I was here, Peyton was hurt. We found out about it on the day we were cutting, literally, the day and hour we were cutting the team to 53, getting ready to play the regular season. We found out we lost it for the season. So those things happen. Sometimes there are teams that are just not good teams. Bottom line, what we ask the customer to pay, the customer, I think, is saying, if you don't give me a winner, I'm going to be very upset. And I think that's vastly different than the philosophy that I learned when I came into business, largely through the vehicle of Walter and Peter O'Malley in the Los Angeles Dodgers, who said, we're going to put a competitive team on the field, we're going to treat the customer really well, Dodger Blue is going to mean something in the community, and we hope that when the downtime comes, we have a reservoir of goodwill where the fans will stay with us. As much as I respect and still believe in that, I'm not sure it's germane anymore.
I would say the two things that I talked to ownership about in Tampa Bay was, to your point, the season tickets were so high that we have to find a way to incorporate fantasy football in our stadium and provide an access point, because if you want to go home and watch the Red Zone and watch your fantasy football team, you can do that. And so I said, we've got to find a way to make it more interactive, create fantasy football games within the stadium that only members that actually show up at the stadium can participate in. And I don't care if we give away a car every game. Everybody that's there can play in a fantasy football game. They stay. If they stay all 4 quarters, we find out if they win, they walk away with a car that day. But we get everybody to go to the stadium. They all sit there and buy concessions and wait to see if they can pull it off. And the other is the Super Bowl is very popular, partially also because the halftime show is so good. And it's a part of why a lot of people watch the Super Bowl. I know my mom watches the Super Bowl, but she wants to watch halftime because she knows it's playing. And I talked about how, the Bruno Marses of the world, or how big of the Beyonces or whatever, clubs got to find a different way to do halftime and make it something that's special for season ticket holders to be able to go to the halftime experience and say, wow, I got to see it. You spend the money, but I got to see so-and-so in concert, or instead of the Frisbee Dogs and the local bands, which are all nice and we appreciate that, but the reality is clubs are still missing that. And I think you've got to turn it into a concert possibility, concert venue, where if you buy a season, what we call a season pass member, because there's events that we did all season long that you can come to because you are a season pass member, not a season ticket. Big difference for us. I think clubs still can look at that venue and sit there and say, if you buy a PSL, you're going to get to see, at one point, we're going to put somebody who has a top 40 hit right now. They're going to be in the center of that stage, and only the people that are at the stadium can watch that concert. And I think that's a tricky thing to pull together, but I think it's something the league and individual clubs need to investigate further.
This is a prime example, Mark's answer is a prime example of a management tenet that I believe strongly in. If you remember nothing from this evening except this exchange, remember this. If you are a senior manager, always, always, always get other opinions, and get opinions from people who look at the world differently than you do. We're from different generations. I define the problem. he defined an answer, the answer, that I would never have thought of. And that's a perfect example of how management works. Bring people in who have a different viewpoint than you, who can add to it. You know, that's the essence of it.
Next question. And I'm looking for an IUPUI student next. This is the next to last question.
Good evening, everyone. My question is for Mr. Polian. Sorry, Mark.
It's all good. Jack decides this one's fine.
My question is, being that you guys experienced Peyton in the very beginning, now that you actually won the Super Bowl last year, how does that feel for you? On the flip side of that, what exactly led him to Denver in the first place?
Well, let me answer the second one first. He took a look at the marketplace. He knew he wanted to play. He and I had talked about that the previous season when he had the injury. There was no question in his mind that he was going to come back and play, and he did. And Mr. Irsay, to his credit, was concerned that he would not play. This injury was so severe. I mean, if you had seen the atrophy on his right side after he had the surgery, it was like looking at before and after. You would not have believed it. But he was determined to play. And so he took a look at the market, he talked to me, talked to Tony, talked to other people, a number of other people that he trusted. And in the end, he decided that Denver was the best place for him, I think because he bonded with John Elway. They're two quarterbacks. They're guys who are alpha dogs. They're leaders. They've been to the top of the mountain place. And he thought that John would give him the best opportunity to win another Super Bowl, which he badly wanted. Relative to how did I feel? Tremendous. Super Bowl Sunday to me was maybe one of the greatest days of my life because Tony Dungy and Marvin Harrison got into the Hall of Fame. I was happier to hear that news than I was to get my own news. I never thought I'd make it the longest day I lived. So, but I knew these guys were going to make it. It was only a question of when. And so when I heard that, it was marvelous, absolutely marvelous. I was on cloud nine. And then to see Peyton win a second Super Bowl was just phenomenal because now he's checked every box. There can be no naysayer who comes along and says, well, he didn't win enough Super Bowls, or well, he didn't win the big game, all those canards that were kind of floating around out there about it. But what that speaks to is why we are in this business and the satisfaction that you will get if you are in it. It is a business, and it's governed by the laws of economics. But at its core, when you strip away the economics, which is what happens on Sunday and what happens on the practice field and what happens in training camp, it is a group of people who are extremely talented. The trainers are the best in the world. The doctors are the best in the world. The equipment people are the best in the world. And these are all the scouts, all these people bond together to form a unit, and they dedicate themselves to a goal that's bigger than themselves. That's their currency. That's what it takes to get in the door. You have to think team first. And when you have that special moments I've been lucky enough to have, and be around special people who buy in and who perform at that level, it's a brotherhood that you never can ever divorce yourself from. It's that all of the people who won a world championship here are forever bound together by that experience. But it goes beyond that. It's all the guys who didn't quite make it. There's probably 100 guys who helped us get there who didn't quite make it. They're all part of the family. And one thing that we wanted to do wherever we went was create that feeling of family among the players and coaches. When I first got here, there were no decorations in the hallways. And I said, let's take every playoff team for the Indianapolis Colts and put their picture up in the hallway. This was leading to the players' locker room at the facility. And someone said, why do you want to do that? And I said, because I want the players to feel that 10 years from now, 15 years from now, they can come back with their children, maybe even their grandchildren, and say, there I am. I was part of an AFC championship team. I was part of an AFC East winner. Well, we did it. Lo and behold, about 2 years go by, and a player who had left in free agency and gone to the Detroit Lions played on Thanksgiving weekend, Thanksgiving Day with the Lions, kept his home here, and was back with his children and parents for the weekend. Came in Saturday to Saturday practice, and former players were always welcome. And I'm walking down the hall to go to my car, and there he is, showing his parents the picture of that team. That's the bond, the pride that you feel. It's almost inexplicable, but it's not as nearly as important by a factor of about 1 million as the military. But it's similar in the sense that you go through experiences that no one else has. No one else knows what it feels like to walk down that tunnel at the Super Bowl. No one else knows what it feels like to get that ring. It's an experience, and no one else knows what it feels like to get on that plane after you've lost and have to come back the next day and grind it out again. So when you spend as many years as we do with players, they become like family. They come in at 21 or 20 years of age, and they leave at 30, and they have wives and children. I still get Christmas cards from guys. You know, the families have grown up, get invited to weddings. It's a special bond. It's a special bond, and it makes our business different than any other.
Last question from an IUPUI student, so you don't all hate me. I'm sorry I couldn't choose all of you, but we're guests of theirs today, so I'll let them have the last question.
Good evening, my name is Spencer Burton, and I actually have a three-part question.
You're going to have to repeat it because I can handle two.
All right. You talked about horse racing and baseball, how they've kind of declined, and the NFL's kind of took the forefront of the sports world in the United States. Do you think that the NFL will ultimately suffer the same fate as baseball and horse racing has had in the recent years? That's the first question. Second one is, do you think the rule changes and player behavior will actually play a part in that? And do you think that the soccer will actually eventually overtake NFL for the #1 sport in the United States?
I don't think soccer will eventually.
I actually think the one sport that's going to give it a run at some point might be lacrosse. In a weird way, I think lacrosse has become a very popular sport, and it has some of the elements of the National League and physicality, so it's a long, long ways away. I don't believe that anything will ever take over the NFL, but I do think that the sport that's an outlier right now, theoretically, lacrosse is starting to really gain a lot of momentum as a unique sport that a lot of people can play, and it's a very physical, athletic game that I think is exciting to watch.
I worry greatly about overexposure. That happened with boxing in the 1950s. There was televised boxing about 4 nights a week. And then there was a death in the mid-1960s. Benny Kid Paret was a welterweight who was killed in the ring in Madison Square Garden in New York in a championship fight, I believe. And that was the tipping point. No one knew what a tipping point was then, but it was. And boxing basically disappeared from the sporting consciousness, except for Muhammad Ali a little bit later. And now, of course, the occasional fight that occurs on HBO. Now, they make incredible amounts of money to the fighters, but there is no minor league, if you will. There is no training ground for young boxers. In fact, we lag terribly behind international boxing. USA boxing is not competitive at all in Olympic level. And that came from a combination of a tragedy, which caused people to revolt against the sport, and I think overexposure in the media. So, could that happen with the NFL? Probably not as drastically, but I do worry about it. Now, fortunately, we've had, since Commissioner Taggart, we've had very forward-looking management. I served on a competition committee group that makes the rules for 19 years. Our whole focus, every time we walk into that meeting room, and they just finished today, actually, here in Indianapolis, was safety. Safety first. What are we going to do to make the game safer? I think it's very probable that you may see the shot clock go away this year. It may be totally illegal in every situation. I say maybe, it hasn't been voted upon yet, but I'm hearing rumblings about that, and it's come up before. Again, trying to make the game safer. The more we make the game safer, the better chance we have of continuing to grow the game at the lower levels. But there is absolutely no question that two things are happening at the lower levels. Number one, more and more people, families, are saying, I don't want my son playing football until he's in the 8th grade or the 7th grade, at minimum. I serve as a part of a group for USA Football that helps develop skills and teach young coaches. And that's where our emphasis is going to be, guided by the docs. We have to follow the medicine. And more docs are coming to the conclusion that we ought to take the helmet contact at least out of it in ages below 12 or 13. I personally believe that's a good thing. On the other hand, my grandson in Charlotte, North Carolina began playing football, tackle football in the 6th grade, and he's done fine. It's just culturally that's the way they do it. But in the Midwest and in the Northeast, participation is way down in youth tackle leagues, and that's eventually going to reflect itself. The key thing, and Mark alluded to lacrosse, which is growing in the Midwest incredibly. It's always been big in the East, but it's now growing in the Midwest. Bottom line, the fastest way for a sport to decline is for young people not to play it, because they grow up and become fans. Major League Baseball, you've heard Rob Manfred, Major League Baseball Commissioner, speak about that just this month. They've got to do more to get youngsters back involved in Little League, back involved in youth baseball. Many of those same youngsters have gone to lacrosse because it's a more active, a more aggressive game. And if we lose youth participation, then the future is not as bright as it could be. So I do worry about it. I'm concerned about it because of this minimal, small amount of work I do for USA Football, but I'm also concerned about it because it's given me everything I could have ever hoped for. When I was 16 years of age, if you had told me that I would have made it to the National Football League in some capacity, I would have said, fine, tell me what I have to do and I'll die tomorrow. You can have my soul, much less to have everything else that's happened. So this game's been incredibly good to me, and it has values which I alluded to before, which you cannot find anywhere else. And that's especially true in a society that has become so fragmented. Kids are alone in front of their iPads. They're not involved as much as they should be in exercise. We were out playing from the time we were 7 years old on. That doesn't happen anymore. Obesity is a problem, as the First Lady has said repeatedly. So there's all good reasons to have this sport, but we got to be very careful that we take care of it and nurture the growth of it at the lower levels. The point you make is well taken.
All right,
One thing, and just to finish up, for everybody here that's in sports management, and really everybody's been invited by the Lash Books to go to Cold Grill at 8:15 it starts. chance you take the skywalks. You don't have to actually go outside. You can almost make it all the way up, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
But they'll certainly have that. That starts tonight again at 8:15. So right after this, everyone that's actually here, whether you're IUPUI or obviously a member here for sports management, we encourage you to go over there and have a chance to meet a lot of the instructors and people and have the chance to get to know each other. So certainly take advantage of that. So I just want to let you all know.
If I wasn't so tired, I'd go over myself.
Was there?
No.
In the basement, there's no Bill Polian?
Well, it might have been in the laboratory. It's,
Well, tonight we're in the Bill Polian room because we took the whole restaurant.
I do not have a three-part question, I have a four-part thank you. Bill mentioned Alice Stoneberg earlier. I second the motion and everything he said and then some. I thank you for your help. She took a phone call from this guy that had this weird idea to give you more work to do in an already busy week and made it happen. So thank you, Ally. And Liz Lashbrook, who has done a wonderful job here making this happen. Could you please join me in thanking Ally and Liz? And also for Mark and Bill, not just for their time, which is extremely valuable this week, but for their kindness, their thoughtfulness, and their insight that they've shared with all of us. If we could thank them, please. As they say, as a small token of appreciation, we do have a bag of Jag swag. And one of the highlights, there is one thing in our history that we are proud of, and there are guests from the University of Alabama, Tuscaloosa, who has had a pretty nice run lately, Roll Tide. But one thing that the Jags can say that Alabama cannot say is on this T-shirt that we would like to share with you for the treadmill. We are undefeated since 1969. Best of luck for the rest of the way.
Thank you, everybody, for coming.
thank you for coming.